Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. Trust the experts. We got to always trust the experts. Got another one for you. We'll start off with this just as a little kicker. The Prime Minister of Canada wrote this tweet yesterday, and you can see some, as my mom used to say, gobbledygook in the middle of it when referring to random, like, MS-DOS code. That would be 2S, LGBTQIA plus peoples. He's giving a shout out to 2S, LGBTQIA plus. Now, I took a minute when I first heard that new random assortment of letters to really revel in the moment of not having any idea what he's talking about. I didn't want to look it up right away. I just wanted to just enjoy the moment of not having a clue what that could possibly mean. Just random letters organized. And somehow the 2S snuck in front of the LGBT part, right? Chappelle has that whole bit about how the T got tacked onto the LGB, but now somehow the 2S got even in front of the whole thing. How were they able to pull that off? But I don't even know what 2S is. All right, I looked it up. You ready? Here's what that is. 2S means two-spirit. Two-spirited people. The second Q is questioning, of course. This is the expert class, making it up as they go along. Yet still, you must follow them. You must obey them. You must trust them. They can never do wrong. The experts can never do wrong. Who are you to question them? I got two stories I want to share today of experts, and it fits perfectly into COVID. They're not about COVID, but COVID is the same thing. The first story I want to share is about the opioid epidemic. We know today, of course, that opioids, painkillers, are very addictive for many people, like life-ruiningly addictive. Well, where did we get this idea that they weren't? It all started with this one guy, Dr. Jick. 1979, he was a doctor at Boston University Med School, and he was sitting around wondering, back in 1979, how many people that we've given painkillers to have gotten addicted from them? It's a good question. Now, most people, maybe if they asked that, they couldn't answer it, but Boston University at the time had the largest database of hospital records in the country. So he ran through the numbers, and he wrote a paragraph. He wrote it in longhand, wrote it handwritten paragraph, and gave it to his secretary to type. And one of the sentences in this paragraph says of almost 12,000 patients treated with opiates while in a hospital before 1979, only 4 had grown addicted. That was one sentence in one paragraph. The paragraph said nothing about how often they were given painkillers, how much painkiller, what type of painkiller, how long they were given painkillers, or for what ailments they were given painkillers. It was one paragraph, and that was the key sentence you saw right there, the headline that was highlighted. His secretary typed it up, sent it to the New England Journal of Medicine, which published it in 1980 on page 123, hidden amongst a bunch of other random letters to the editor from researchers and doctors across the country. And the headline was, "Addiction Rate in Patients Treated with Narcotics Less than 1%. Less than 1% of patients treated with narcotics developed addiction. Less than 1%. Now, I want to be very clear. In the New England Journal of Medicine, they have the peer-reviewed studies. But then at the end, they also have these quick little letter to the editor kind of thing, just quick little anecdote, little tiny little things. And again, it was just a paragraph printed amongst many, many other paragraphs on page 123 of this edition. The very short of the story, we could talk a lot more about this, of course. As the decades went on, big pharmaceutical companies started marketing these painkillers to doctors. And doctors said, whoa, we don't want people to get addicted. And they said, well, no, don't worry about it. Less than 1% of patients get addicted. Look, here's this landmark study from Dr. Jick. And doctors said, oh, wow, that's amazing. And they started handing it out like candy. They were told they weren't addicted. How do they know? Landmark study. Dr. Jick, of course. This led to a massive amount of painkillers handed to people that they could take home on their own with no doctor oversight and just take as many as they wanted for as long as they wanted and keep coming back for more and more and more. But what's the problem, Slater? They're not addicted. That one paragraph letter from Dr. Jick took on a life of its own. Dr. Jick, it wasn't written, but if you went back and learned, These were given to hospital patients. They were tiny doses of these painkillers that were given to people who were in only the most acute pain, all overseen by doctors in a hospital. And now we're handing over bottles of pills to anyone who asks for them. It's a completely different situation. But it didn't matter. Porter and Jick. That's what the letter's now known as. Porter and Jick. And it was just a brief little paragraph, right? But no, now as it took on a life of its own, it was a study. Oh, it was a study in the New England Journal of Medicine. Landmark study. Other studies referred to this study, the landmark study. The National Institute of Health called it a landmark study. The doctors at Harvard, right? They urged readers at the Harvard Medical Journal to consider the work of Porter and Jick. It was one paragraph. It showed clearly that there's no reason to be afraid of addiction and painkillers. Very, very rare, less than 1%, don't you know? Scientific America called it an extensive study. Time magazine in 2001 called it a landmark study. And Dr. Jick's over here saying, whoa, guys, I jotted down a couple numbers in 1979. It was a short little paragraph. You guys are totally missing the point here. But no one cared because that little letter was all that was needed to justify their beliefs that these painkillers were the Holy Grail. Now, here's my favorite part of this story. All the people who cited this landmark study, no one ever read it. Again, there was no study. It was just one paragraph, but no one even read that because the New England Journal of Medicine did not put their archives online until 2010. So for someone to read that letter, they would have had to gone to a med school library and dig up that one issue of the New England Journal of Medicine from 1980 and turn to page 123 to read it. No one did that. It took on a life of its own. Landmark study. Amazing. That's the very short of it. There's a ton more to it, but that's the gist. And when I heard that story, I thought of the 6 feet rule. Dr. Gottlieb, former head of the FDA, he's out here now saying that no one knows where the 6 feet rule came from for COVID. Right? You got to keep 6 feet distance. And everyone assumes, like the Porter and Jick letter, that's because of some big study that, of course, has proven that the virus is spread. But no, I just made it up. And at first they debated 10 feet. They said it's got to be 10 feet. And someone in the White House is like, no, that's too far. Let's make it 3. And then they're like, well, maybe that's not far away enough. Let's make it 6. And they're like, no, okay, 6. Just made it up. Totally made it up. Just like Porter and Jick. Same with masks. All these studies that we've showed before COVID, saying that masks don't do anything. But now it's gospel. Don't question the experts. Let me give you another example. Abigail Shrier, the wonderful Abigail Shrier, interviewed 2 of the top doctors, experts, who work with transgender children. One of them is Jazz's doctor. Are you familiar with Jazz? Jazz is a young boy, who took puberty blockers starting at 11 years old. And one of these doctors that Abigail Shrier talked to turned Jazz's penis into a vagina when he turned 18. Okay, so like when I say top doctor for transgender kids, I mean this is like a celebrity transgender kid, like that's this person's doctor, right? The other person is a clinical psychologist at the University of California, San Francisco, Child and Adolescent Gender Clinic. By the way, your local children's hospital almost probably will have a transgender child's gender clinic in it, right? She recently co-authored an op-ed to the New York Times warning that transgender healthcare providers were treating kids recklessly. That was her argument. She's in it. She's in this world. Used to be a major proponent of it. And she's like, maybe we need to pump the brakes a little bit. And the New York Times passed on it, saying that it was outside of our coverage priorities right now. Both of these doctors are speaking out against, or at least not fully against, but at least issuing some warnings about this transgendered kid craze. 2 points. Let me share this quote first. One of the doctors says, I think there was naivete on the part of pediatric endocrinologists, those are the people who give hormones, hormone blockers, cross-sex hormones, who are proponents of early puberty blockade, thinking that just this magic can happen and surgeons can do anything. Same thing with big pharma and painkillers and doctors. We found the Holy Grail. We found the pill that will eliminate pain, no side effects, no consequences, no cost, no addiction. Same thing here. Oh, we'll just give hormones. It'll fix the kids, and then the surgeons can wrap it up, no problem. They believed in magic. Because doctors and scientists and researchers, they know everything. They can do no wrong. But Slater, it's okay. People are going to make mistakes. As long as people can speak out against it, then it's fine, right? People were allowed to speak out against it, right? People are allowed to speak the truth? No, dissent's never allowed. The other doctor, there are definitely people who are trying to keep out anyone who doesn't absolutely buy the party line, that everything should be affirming, and that there's no room for dissent. I think that's a mistake. So you see the same thing with COVID, right? The scientists can do no wrong, and you can't dissent. I'll give you a third point here. This one's more a bigger societal point, that kids are always right. The child is always right. For 100 years, and we see that with that's why Greta Thunberg is always put in the front of the global warming debate, right? Because she's a kid, and kids are innocent and pure, and they speak the truth because they're so innocent and blah, 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 right? This is a very modern belief that kids are always right. And it's applied to the transgender whole thing too, right? So for 100 years, they called it gender dysphoria. The treatment was to wait, right? A kid experiences gender dysphoria. It's a mental illness. We'll wait. We'll help them feel comfortable in their own body. They'll eventually grow out of it. That was 100 years of treatment. But now, because the kids are always right, it's called affirmative care, right? Kids know what's best. The kid says they're trapped in the wrong body. Great, we'll give them puberty blockers. Then a couple years later, we'll give them hormones of the other gender, and then we'll perform surgery and body mutilation, and they'll be fixed. They'll be in the right body. Where did that come from? How did that start? It's extremely similar to Dr. Jick. It's so stinking similar to that story. There was one doctor, a psychologist, in the Netherlands. Her name was Peggy Cohen-Kettenis. And she had the bright idea that we should use the same medicines that we use for chemical castration on violent rapists in kids. We give these medicines, we give this concoction to violent rapists so that they don't rape people anymore. Let's give it to little kids who feel like they're in the wrong body. Shockingly, pharmaceutical companies were very happy to fund the studies that concluded this is a great thing. Sure, no problem, no concerns whatsoever. We just funded a study here that says giving these drugs to kids is great. Buy more of our drug. I wonder why they were so happy to fund these studies, huh? So that was in the 90s. By 2006, that same woman had second thoughts about all this. And she realized that hormones, if you block hormones that are naturally in your body, or even you give other hormones of cross-gender, but let's say if you block hormones, you're not just blocking hormones to sex organs, you're also blocking those hormones to the brain. So what effect does hormone suppression have on brain development? And she's like, oh, okay, so I thought about this, a decade or so ago. Not such a great idea anymore. I don't want to do it, right? I'm not a big proponent of this. Just like Dr. Jick. Dr. Jick wrote this letter. A couple decades go by, and now he's like, whoa. No. Not, he was more like, not what I meant. She's like, I was wrong, but it was too late. Big Pharma was all over it, selling pills. 2007, they called it the Dutch Protocol. She was from the Netherlands. It arrived at Boston Children's Hospital, and they're the leading transgender clinic for kids in the entire country. And now it's here to stay forever. Nearly every children's hospital has a transgender child clinic. Some of them are quiet about it. And no questions are allowed, no dissent, because the experts know best. His name's Jack Turbin. He's the chief of adolescent psychiatry at Stanford Med School. He said in 2018 that the only significant side effect of giving puberty blockers to kids, the only significant side effect is that adolescents may fall behind on bone density. That's it? That's the only side effect you can think of to giving a 12-year-old puberty blockers? Bone density? It's amazing to witness in real time the top doctors, top scientists, researchers, otherwise very smart people, first turned into just absolute stooges of the whole transgender movement, and also child abusers in the end. This is what the virus of progressivism can do to the brain of an otherwise smart person. Whether we found the holy grail of painkiller that eliminates pain, but it's not addictive. And everyone's like, oh, great, yeah, no problem. Or it's this modern belief that you can hormonally and surgically change genders. It's amazing how many people fall for that. And they're smart people, right? Knowledge is good. Knowledge is a good thing. But it's not the same thing as wisdom. That's what we're lacking today. We have a free app in the App Store. We have it on our TV as well. I'll give you a handy-dandy demonstration here of how, so everything's right here. We got Dana, Bill, Buck, Jesse, yours truly. We can watch a little, this is yesterday's segment on the depravity of man. Are people inherently good? No, they're not. Or no, how about this? I think they are, Slater. Let me watch, and I can learn and get other perspectives and opinions. There, that's yesterday's show right there. It's all on the free app. It's on your TV. It's on your smartphone. Free download. Just search for The First, and it's yours. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Slater Crusaders. Bobby Jindal is going to be on the show coming up in a little bit, which is pretty cool. We'll talk with someone who's suing the government about the situation at the border. So that's all coming up. I want to share just a little bit of hope, something I was contemplating yesterday. We could all use a little hope. I've been a little down lately. I live in California. The recall didn't go well. I've been a little discouraged, excuse me. So I got a little hope here. So this is what I'm thinking. Maybe one day it will be, I was going to say the hipster thing. That's not quite right. Maybe one day it will be rebellious to be conservative. Okay, hear me out here, right? Back in the day, it was the parents who were very conservative, right? And kids rebelled by being all rock and roll and long hair and bikinis and whatever, being all progressive, right? But now, most parents are super progressive. And maybe kids will look at that and be like, oh, look at you. I guess back in the day, kids would be like, oh, my parent's such a square. And maybe now they'll be like, oh, my parent's such a queer. You're allowed to say that now, queer. It's not, I know, I hate saying it, but you're allowed, that's like the LGBTQ. It's the first Q in the president, the prime minister of Canada. It was QQ, second was queer, the first was queer. You're allowed to say that now, right? So maybe kids, rebellious kids are like, look at my parent over here, such a queer. And then they become more conservative. I don't know. Maybe. I'm trying to find some hope somewhere. But really, like if parents and administrators and the school system and just the system, if everything is super progressive and telling kids America's a terrible place and all that stuff, maybe like for a while, kids would be like, yeah, you're right. But then as time goes on, that rebellious spirit inside of rebellious kids will be like, no, I love America. Yeah, screw you. Screw you, system. I love this country. And then pop culture will start to reflect that in a rebellious way. Maybe. Here's Pitbull. This is Pitbull on stage here. He's from Cuba.
So whoever the doesn't like the United States of America, may God bless you. But you at the same time. If you don't like the United States of America, go back to the countries that we the from, and you'll see how much you appreciate the United States of America.
That's what I'm talking about, Mr. Worldwide. Now, everyone in the audience cheered, but I'm pretty sure he could say anything. Be like, you all suck, I hate everyone here. Be like, yeah. So that you can't judge it based on, but that's something, right? Now, we as conservatives need to be careful of celebrities. Whenever a celebrity and you align on an issue, consider it a fluke. Right? There's no need to start embracing celebrities or celebritydom as anything of value, really. That being said, this is Jason Aldean. He's a country singer. He said, so let me get this about vaccine mandates in California. So let me get this straight. It's no longer a decision as parents or free Americans to make decisions about our kids. Gavin Newsom makes those decisions for us now? You got to be kidding me. People in California should be outraged. People everywhere else better start standing up and speaking out now. This is not how America and being free works. He was criticized. He said, I will never apologize for my beliefs or my love for my family and country. This is the greatest country in the world, and I want to keep it that way. So listen, that's cool, right? But you look at those two, and you're like, oh, well, you're probably two of the richest celebrities in the country. So maybe if you make enough money, you can start to say whatever you want. Not everyone has that power. I want to tell the story of two professors here. The first is a professor of geophysical science at University of Chicago, been there for 10 years. He got in trouble, suspended, whatever, because he said, now brace yourself for this, that people, students, should be graded based off of the same standard of excellence. It's pretty racist of me even to repeat what he dare say. So a group of graduate students banded together and wrote a letter of denunciation. 162 signatories, each with the he, him, she, her pronoun after their name. I don't know why they do the two. I don't know why it's he, him, because I've never seen anyone he, her, or she, him. I don't know why they even do the both, or any of it at all, obviously. And they complained, they said that this professor was threatening the safety and belonging. I love that, the belonging. You're threatening my belonging of all underrepresented groups within the department. And he said, listen, this is a problem, this diversity, inclusion, equity framework, DIE, this diversity, inclusion, equity framework. We've talked about this a ton about a year or so ago when this was a big deal. They're the opposite, right? When they tell you diversity, inclusion, equity, what they really mean is the opposite of those things. There's no diversity of thought allowed. It's equity of outcome, right, which is not true equality of opportunity, and it's exclusion of certain types of people and viewpoints. It's the opposite of what they say. So he said, this is no good. So what I propose is merit, fairness, and equality. Merit, fairness, and equality. You ready for this revolutionary idea? This is where applicants to the university are treated as individuals and evaluated through a rigorous and unbiased process based on their merit and qualifications alone. Revolutionary. He was supposed to give a lecture at MIT, and there was enough of an outrage mob that got him uninvited from the lecture at MIT. Amazing. He said, woke ideology is essentially totalitarian in nature. It attempts to corral the entirety of human existence into one narrow ideological viewpoint and to silence anyone who disagrees. I believe that these features ultimately derive from the ideology's abandonment of the principle of the inherent dignity of each human being. That's such an important line, the inherent dignity of each human being. That is the abandonment of God. Everyone is made in God's image. That's a biblical truth. If you deny God, you deny that truly revolutionary belief that everyone is made in God's image. We take that for granted, this idea of dignity and that we should treat everybody as you want to be treated. We take that for granted. That's not human nature. It's a revolutionary idea that everyone's created in God's image and deserves dignity. You eliminate God, you eliminate that idea, and this is what you get. So he's not allowed to speak out these very basic common sense truths. Second story, a professor at UCLA, been there for 40 years. A student emailed him and said, Professor, you need to grade the papers of black students with more compassion and leniency because of George Floyd and Amy Cooper. Do you remember Amy Cooper? Amy Cooper was that woman in that park in New York City, the dog park, who called police because a black bird watcher threatened her and her dog. Remember her? And everyone freaked out. It took about a year for the truth to come out that this guy has a history of threatening people in the park. And it took about a year before we heard the actual 911 call and her side of the story and other people who know this guy and this guy's a psycho and all the rest. But it didn't matter. At the time, Amy Cooper was a horrible racist and all white people, therefore, are. So the person wrote him an email and said, you need more compassion when grading black people because you're placing these conditions in our society are placing an unfair academic disadvantage because of the traumatic circumstances that are out of their control. And they demanded a no harm exam, which is a beautiful thing, right? This is a test where you can only improve your grade. What an amazing concept. Like, I wish I came up with that. I'm not even mad at him. You take this test and you can only improve your grade. Compassion and leniency. That's what we ask for. Compassion and leniency to black students. Love how that's framed. We only want to have compassion. Don't you want to have compassion? You don't want to have compassion? Wow. We'll destroy you. So the professor wrote back an email and said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But just thinking it through here, what if there's a student who's half Asian, half black? What do I do with them? Full concession or just half? Also, what if a student's from Minneapolis, where George Floyd is from, right? Are they going to be devastated more or less than a black student because they're from Minneapolis? What do we do there? A petition was circulated, 20,000 people signed it to fire him for being woefully racist. 2 weeks later, he was suspended. Police officers were stationed outside of his house because of all the death threats he was getting. And the school publicly threw him under the bus, which your employer will probably do too, count on it. 40 years of being a professor at UCLA and the university, wrote this whole blowhardy email or press release about how they were offended and it was disturbing and offensive and how could he have said such a thing. They did the whole song and dance. So the question is, do you have freedom of speech in America? You can't let these people win. You can't let them win. Tomorrow, we're going to go into great detail about this Department of Justice memo saying that people who behave poorly at school board meetings could be investigated by the FBI and labeled as domestic terrorists. There's a bunch of backstory to this that we're going to talk about in great detail tomorrow. But that's where we are with freedom of speech today. You go to a local school board meeting, and they may call the feds. That will silence speech. So is there freedom of speech? Maybe. If you're as rich as Pitbull and Jason Aldean. But we can't save a republic with those two alone. Coming up next, we'll talk about the border, a lawsuit that's demanding that border agents are allowed to do their job. And then we'll talk with Bobby Jindal about health. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, how the media works, it's very fascinating. What they decide to cover, not cover, when they decide to do it. The border, there was, all these Haitians at the border. For about 4 days, the media didn't cover it at all. But then they did. Why? Why did they decide to do it? Well, you saw the video with the guy on the horse whipping the migrants, right? And there's this whole big frenzy about it. It didn't happen. It wasn't true, but it didn't matter. But that was in the news for a couple of days because of that, because it was able to make America look bad, look like the evil guy, the bad guys in this story. And then once that story went away, that's it. No more border. Even though we have reports of tens of thousands of more Haitians coming up. The problem may be worse now than it was even when it was covered in the news a week or two ago. But it's out of mind. Out of sight, out of mind. Amazing. This is the former Border Patrol chief.
We have over 400,000 documented gotaways, people or incidents where people crossed the border and got away this last year. And hundreds of miles of border where we have no idea what took place. That's what mass migration creates.
Gotaway is a funny term. I want to go to Kris Kobach. He's the former Secretary of State of Kansas, and he's the lead attorney representing Texas sheriffs and ICE against the federal government. Kris, how are you, sir?
Great to be with you. Doing well.
Give me the backstory here. What's the genesis of your lawsuit?
The lawsuit is based on the fact that the Biden administration in February has ordered ICE agents and Border Patrol agents to violate federal law. Back in the 90s, Congress wrote several and enacted several statutes that were designed to prevent catch and release. But what we have now is catch and release everywhere, and ICE has basically been told not to do their job. The federal law requires that when an alien comes across the land border into the United States, he must either be immediately deported through what's called expedited removal, or he must be put into removal proceedings and detained or sent to remain in Mexico, which was the Trump policy, which is specifically laid out in statute. Biden's doing none of that. And in the interior, he's forcing ICE to break the law. There are also several statutes that say if a person is a previously deported felon or a previously deported non-felon, you have to immediately reinstate the previous removal order and deport him. Similarly, if a person has been convicted of certain crimes, moral turpitude crimes, drug crimes, gun crimes, you must detain him during his deportation proceeding. None of that is happening. And the federal statutes use the word shall, and the Biden administration is ignoring federal law, and worse, it's ordering ICE and Border Patrol officers to ignore federal law. So the sheriffs are saying, look, we've had enough, and they're teaming up with ICE agents, something that's never happened before in a federal lawsuit, saying we want to follow the law, and we need you, the Biden administration, to allow officers to follow the law because it's killing us. The sheriffs are overrun with crime. In some of the counties, crime has increased 8-fold since the Biden administration took office. In other counties, the crime has doubled. But everywhere, they're overwhelmed with the criminal impact of this massive influx of illegal immigration.
Did the Biden administration in February, this memo you're talking about, did it tell the border agents that they should not do these things that you just outlined that are in federal law? Or did it force the agents to do these other things that violate? Does that make sense? So was it don't do these things, or was it you must do these things?
Right. Of course, the Biden administration would never be so blatant or so obviously illegal as to say, here are some federal statutes, you don't have to follow them anymore. Instead, it's crafted in terms that say, well, we have priorities. And they list these 3 areas of priorities: aggravated felons, terrorists, and recent border crossers. And so in those cases, you might be able to deport someone, but in every other case, which is the other cases are, over 90% of the people in the country illegally and coming to the country illegally, you cannot take any enforcement action. You can't detain him, you can't deport him, you can't do anything to him unless you get special approval, and special approval may take 2 months, pre-approval from your supervisors. So basically, they ordered ICE to stand down. And the testimony from our ICE agents is that it's virtually impossible to get approval. It takes forever. And so the ICE officers are being forced to sit at their desks and do nothing. Similarly, Border Patrol officers are no longer being able to detain people. They're turning them loose into the United States. It's truly outrageous, and it has sent a signal to the people coming north. And these signals are sent very quickly. And that is, once you get to the United States, hey, don't worry, Border Patrol is not protecting the border anymore. They're processing us in. They are babysitters now. They are not allowed to be Border Patrol officers. And ICE has been forced to stand down. You will not be deported in the interior of the country, even if you commit a crime. In our lawsuit, we provide evidence of many cases where people have been convicted, illegal aliens convicted of dangerous crimes, sexual assault on a child, gun crimes, drug crimes, serious crimes. And the Biden administration has told ICE officers, no, we let him go. We are not interested in removing him. He's illegally in the country and he's committed a serious crime. They're being told, let him go.
What are the 3 priorities you mentioned a second ago? Terrorists.
Yeah, terrorists, aggravated felons, and illegal aliens who have been convicted of an aggravated felony, and people who've come into the country since November 1st, 2020. But we've since learned with a new memo that just came out last week, they don't even particularly care about those last 2 categories, because under the new memorandum, now even aggravated felons could be allowed to stay in the country if certain mitigating factors are considered. Did the crime occur a long time ago? Has the alien been here a long time already? And does he have any family here? Okay, let him stay. Similarly, recent arrivals are being allowed in, as we've all observed. The Haitians were a perfect, small example or large example of that. 15,000 and about 13,000 are allowed in, 2,000 are sent back. So the Biden administration basically only seems to care about terrorists, and I'm sure as the evidence comes out, we may find that even there, the policy is lax.
Okay, this is insane. Let me play devil's advocate for a second. And I can't properly, but I'm sure there's one of the other lawyers on the other side who's saying, oh, Kris, you're being deceitful. Sure, you cited some laws, but here are some other laws that say X, Y, Z, and we're following those laws, and they overlap, and we're just interpreting the best we can. And we are also considering the realities on the ground of the overwhelming and ever-changing situation, and we're doing the best we can by prioritizing. We can't do it all. What do you say to that?
So what they are saying is similar to what you just said. They're not citing other laws. There are no other statutes that give the head of DHS or the president or anybody else discretion to disobey these federal commands in statute that say you shall detain and you shall deport these certain categories. But what they are saying is that, you know what, we have prosecutorial discretion here. All law enforcement agencies have discretion, and therefore we can, even though the law says we must do this, we shall do this, you know what, we're gonna treat shall as may. And that's literally what the Department of Justice is arguing in the briefs, is that shall means may. And as anyone who has any familiarity with the English language would know, that's nonsense. That's like saying up means down. But that's what they're arguing. And they're saying that prosecutorial discretion is inherent in the process, and you really can't ever get away with it. But that's what Congress intended to do. Congress, back in 1996, said, we are taking away discretion at these times in the process and with these types of aliens. And the Biden administration is ignoring it. And they're going to court with the argument that, well, shall means may, and we always have discretion. And our argument is no, not when Congress takes it away.
Two more quick questions. I'm sure you've seen Bill Clinton, the State of the Union address, where he talked about, we got to shut down the border, basically, right? Build a wall and shut down the border.
Yeah.
What changed in the Democratic Party? Because I think the common belief is that, Democrats want open borders because they'll have more Democratic voters. Okay, fine. But did Bill Clinton not realize that back in 1991 or whatever, 92? What's changed with the Democrats' position on the border?
It's a great question, because Bill Clinton signed those laws that I was just talking about that were passed by Republican Congresses in the 1990s. And, even Joe Biden changed. He used to talk tough on the border. I think what changed is that many Democrats came to the conclusion that, these Democrat leaders in Washington, D.C. came to the conclusion that these individuals are coming from poor countries. They are overwhelmingly dependent upon the welfare state when they arrive to one of the most generous welfare states in the Western Hemisphere, and they will vote Democrat. And I think they've made a crass political calculation that it's okay to violate our laws as long as there are more undocumented Democrats coming into the country who will soon be voting for their party. And it's horrible, putting our country,
Yep.
our laws, and everything else aside, all in the name of power.
We got to run. Give me the timing of your lawsuit.
We filed it on July 1st. We've shortly thereafter filed a motion for preliminary injunction. That motion is on the judge's desk. We're awaiting his decision on that. That was fully briefed as of August 23rd. So we're hoping that in the very near future, the judge will give us some relief. And if he does, it will have an immediate effect in slowing down this surge of immigration coming toward us.
Beautiful. Kris Kobach, former Secretary of State of Kansas. Keep up the good work, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with Bobby Jindal coming up next. You hear about healthy people, healthy kids dying from COVID. It's not true. Talk about that next. Mike Slater, spread the word. As Slater Crusaders, we're told that we need to follow the science, and you can't question the science. But today, you're not allowed to even determine what healthy is and what healthy isn't. I'll give you an example of this. This People magazine, but it's everywhere. Perfectly healthy 16-year-old who loved photography and video games died suddenly from COVID-19. I'm not mocking this 16-year-old by any stretch of the imagination whatsoever, but there's no way that 16-year-old could be described as healthy. But the media wants you to think that he was, and you've seen, it was a Cosmo, I think, had some morbidly obese women on the front cover saying, "This is healthy." Bobby Jindal is from the American First Policy Institute, of course, former governor of Louisiana. I did not realize, but has a public health background. He was the Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services for Planning and Evaluation under George W. Bush. Mr. Jindal, how are you, sir?
Mike, it is great to be on the air with you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thanks for taking the time and talking about the super important thing that has been completely overlooked. Like, what a great opportunity COVID was to truly talk about health, because now losing weight isn't just about like looking good or whatever. There's like a life or death, even more of an acute life or death motivation, but the public health administration, the public health world just completely missed it, right?
No, look, I think that's right. And I think there are three components when you talk about public health and what's healthy. One is this political correctness that doesn't allow us to just talk common sense. Secondly is this idea of personal responsibility and autonomy. And then third is what happens inside healthcare systems. And that is important. That's not the entire conversation. So on the political correctness, you're exactly right that, hey, look, when you and I were growing up, it was just common sense. Your parents would tell you, you can't watch too much TV, you can't play too many video games, you got to go outside and play. And that was, at school, you had recess and team sports. And that was just, you didn't need a doctor to tell you that. That was just common sense. Today, because of political correctness, we're supposed to censor what we say. We're not supposed to say what used to be common sense. The second part of this, however, is important as well, which is individual autonomy. Look, it may be true that if you eat nothing but kale, you could live forever. I think people should have choices, right? As adults, especially if I want to eat chocolate chip cookies, or I'm from South Louisiana, we don't have the healthiest lifestyles down here. We enjoy our lives. I think it's really about giving people honest, transparent information and letting them make their own choices. And so you can't be politically correct. You got to be brutally honest with people. You got to tell people, hey, look, if you want to live a healthy lifestyle, you probably have to move more than the average. You've got to eat less. You've got to eat healthier. But then you make the choices. You live with the consequences. And then finally, the third piece of this, which is the healthcare system itself, I do think we've got to move towards a healthcare system where people have more incentives and control, whether it's health savings accounts, whether it's the ability to choose their own doctors, or where, again, they've got choice, they've got autonomy, and they're in charge of their own healthcare.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's the nuance of all of it. Where did the political correctness around obesity come from in this country? It's been talked about for a decade or so as being a major problem. But throughout COVID, you're not allowed to talk about it. Why not?
Well, look, COVID is a great example of the politicization of healthcare, right? Because all of a sudden what we've heard is follow the science, but the experts don't follow the science. Dr. Fauci over the weekend decided he gets to decide whether we celebrate Christmas. Apparently, Mike, you and I don't get to decide. I didn't realize I needed the federal government's permission to go and celebrate Christmas with my family. We were told up front, remember the whole evolution of COVID. At first, we were told, hey, look, if you lock yourselves indoors for a few weeks, this will be over. And then it was, if you wear a mask, this will be over. And then it was where if you wear 2 masks. And then it was where if you wear 3 masks. And then it was, well, if you get vaccinated. And then it was, well, if you get vaccinated and then a booster shot. And then it was a vaccinated booster shot and a mask. And you still need permission to go and celebrate with your relatives at Christmas. I think what's happened is the public health elites, just like in so much of the rest of our lives, don't trust the American people. They don't think we can be trusted with information. They don't think we can be trusted or the bottom line facts. And so they will decide for us. And at some undetermined date, they will tell us when COVID is over and when we're allowed to have Christmas, when we're allowed to go to restaurants and go to gyms and go outside the house. You remember last year, this isn't new. Last year, they were chiding us for, there was almost, it wasn't quite this bad, but you almost felt like they were going to go door to door and check to make sure you didn't have too many people for Thanksgiving. And it's just, and what we're losing is both the sense of individual rights and responsibilities, but also the willingness to treat the American people as adults. And the same thing's happening when it comes to weight, obesity, when it comes to other chronic diseases like diabetes and other diseases. Let's just be honest with the American people. They're adults, they can handle it. We don't need government elites to decide for us. We don't need them to talk down for it to us. We don't need them to make our decisions for us. Let us make those decisions. And sometimes you got to tell people things that are uncomfortable, but that's not what the politically correct want, because they won't. And make no mistake, this is about amassing power for the elites, the government elites, the media elites, the academic elites. They know better than we do. They want to decide for us.
That's definitely the principle. One last question on the obesity part. This is super fascinating. There was a stretch where culturally the elites would look down on overweight people, right? As backwards, poor, eating junk. You need to be eating kale and health food and blah, 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 blah. But then, for some reason, the progressives became like this fat body positivity. Like there's even like a study at major universities, fat studies. And so now it's like big is beautiful and you should be overweight. But in a weird gaslighting way, like this is healthy. It's one thing to say it's beautiful, whatever, but to say it's healthy, like that's not right. What are the cultural forces going on here that make us so confused?
Look, I think part of it was elitism, where it was, because some of the same people that are trying to do this wouldn't let their own kids eat these diets. Make no mistake about it. The same people that are out there saying, oh, fine, it's fine for your kids to be unhealthy would never let their kids do these same things. part of it is an elitism that, oh, this is fine for us, but this is not good for you. And you see this duality throughout the elites where they want to live by one set of rules. They want a different set of rules for everybody else. But look, let's just be honest with the American people. Any doctor will tell you, and you're right, this isn't about so-called, quote, body shaming or everybody's got to look like a fashion model. It's not that ridiculous extreme. No. But we can't go to the other extreme where we tell people, hey, look, we know there are real consequences to if you're not active, you don't have a healthy diet. There are issues with blood pressure. There's issues with heart disease. There are issues, like I said, with avoidable diabetes. These are real, not only personal issues, these are real costs to the American healthcare system. They have real consequences in terms of life expectancy. You're not doing a kid any favor by lying to them. Now, I'm not saying you should shame them, but on the other hand, it used to be part of everyday culture that, yeah, kids went outside and played. Kids played on sports teams. There was a reason we had gym classes and PE classes in schools, and there was a reason we had recess. Not only do you want to wear the kids out, so they'll sit down in class, but it's just good for them, right, to go run around and burn off. Now, I'm not an extremist. My kids, they've grown up, they eat some junk food. It's not like our house that we feed them broccoli and, nothing but healthy food. Yeah. It's a balance. It's a little bit of everything. Yeah, they eat fried foods and they eat, Oreos, but they also eat fruits and vegetables. And I think so much of this modern nonsense can be thrown out if you just remember what your mom taught you, which was everything in moderation. You're not going to die if you drink a soda. You're not going to die if you. In the South, we deep fry our turkey, so we know how to enjoy it. But we also can't do that every day. That's not something you do every day.
Bobby Jindal, American First Policy Institute. Wonderful to talk to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
True story. Mike Slater. Tomorrow we'll talk about the Department of Justice memo calling you domestic terrorists for speaking at school board meetings. Spread the word.